Welcome to News Nexus. Today we're exploring a question that could reshape the global economy. Could the BRICS currency replace the US dollar? For decades, the dollar has stood as the undisputed king of global finance. It has been the backbone of international trade, the reserve currency that nearly every nation relies on, and the symbol of America's dominance in the world economy. But now, with the rise of BRICS, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, serious discussions about creating an alternative currency are gaining momentum. And many are beginning to wonder, is the dollar's dominance finally under threat? This is more than an economic question. It's a story about power, politics, and the future of global order. To understand this challenge, let's step back to see how the dollar rose to power. After World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement positioned the US dollar at the center of the financial system. Back then, the dollar was tied to gold, and every other major currency was tied to the dollar. This gave nations stability and predictability. Even when the US ended the gold standard in the early 1960s, the dollar did not collapse. In fact, it grew stronger. Oil-producing nations priced crude in dollars. Commodities from wheat to copper to natural gas, all traded in dollars. Central banks around the world continued holding dollars as their primary reserve. Today, around 60% of global reserves are still held in dollars. Nearly 90% of currency transactions involve the dollar. And whenever countries borrow, settle contracts, or issue bonds, the dollar remains the default. This dominance gives the United States enormous influence. Washington can impose sanctions, cut off nations from the global banking system, and sway markets worldwide. But power always creates pushback. And this is where BRICS enters the stage. Together, BRICS nations represent more than 40% of the world's population and nearly a quarter of global GDP. China and India are among the fastest-growing economies. Russia and Brazil supply vast natural resources, while South Africa contributes critical minerals and metals. For years, BRICS leaders have argued that the global financial system is tilted toward the West. They created the New Development Bank as an alternative to the IMF and World Bank. And now, they are openly discussing a new shared currency. Why would they challenge the dollar? The reasons are clear. First, reducing U.S. influence. For Russia, being cut off from dollar systems during sanctions highlighted their vulnerability. Second, diversification. Relying on a single currency makes economies fragile. When the Federal Reserve changes interest rates, the ripple is felt everywhere. Third, economic sovereignty. A shared BRICS currency could allow members to trade without using the dollar, giving them more independence. And fourth, geopolitical power. A new currency wouldn't just be about finance. It would symbolize a shift in global power, signaling a multipolar world instead of one dominated by Washington. So what might such a currency look like? Some propose a digital currency built on blockchain. Others imagine a commodity-backed model, anchored in gold, oil, or raw materials. There's also the idea of a basket currency, like the IMF's special drawing rights, combining contributions from all 5 members. On paper, it sounds powerful. Russia and Brazil contribute food and energy. South Africa adds gold. China brings manufacturing might. India supplies services and technology. But in practice, the challenges are enormous. Each BRICS nation has a very different economy. China runs a state-controlled model. India is a democracy with open markets. Russia depends on energy, and Brazil and South Africa struggle with volatility. Aligning these differences into one currency would be difficult. Then there's trust. China and India may cooperate economically, but they remain strategic rivals. Would India really tie its financial future to a system where China has the biggest weight? Global acceptance is another hurdle. The dollar works because it's trusted, backed by deep financial markets and liquidity. Convincing businesses and central banks to abandon that trust won't happen overnight. Infrastructure is also missing. The dollar is supported by decades of payment networks, clearinghouses, and global banking systems. BRICS would need to build all of that from scratch. And let's not forget politics. Not every BRICS nation may be equally enthusiastic. Some benefit from dollar trade and may resist drastic changes. Even so, BRICS is making progress. China and Russia now trade largely in their own currencies. India has tested rupee settlements for Russian oil. Brazil and China have signed deals to bypass the dollar. The New Development Bank has funded projects in local currencies, Step by step, the groundwork is being laid. But let's answer the key question. Could a BRICS currency truly replace the dollar? In the short term, the answer is no. The dollar is simply too entrenched, too trusted, and too widely used. But perhaps replacing the dollar is not even the goal. Even reducing reliance from 60% of global reserves down to 40% would mark a seismic shift. It would weaken America's sanction power. It would reduce Washington's leverage. And it would tilt the balance toward a more divided, multipolar system. The future may not belong to one currency alone. Instead, we could see a world where the dollar, the euro, the yuan, and perhaps a BRICS currency share the stage. That system could be more balanced, but also more unpredictable. For ordinary people, the consequences could be very real. If oil shifts away from dollar pricing, energy costs could change dramatically. If central banks diversify reserves, the value of savings and loans could be affected. If multiple competing currencies emerge, global trade could become more complex and possibly more unstable. For governments, borrowing may grow more expensive. For businesses, transactions could become harder. And for global politics, the end of U.S. financial dominance could reshape alliances and rivalries. So, could the BRICS currency replace the dollar? Not tomorrow, not even in the next decade. But the cracks in the dollar's armor are already visible. The real story is not about one sudden collapse. It's about erosion. Step by step, through trade deals, digital experiments, and regional agreements, the foundations of the dollar's supremacy could slowly weaken. And if history teaches us anything, it's that no empire, no system, and no currency stays on top forever. Thank you for watching News Nexus. If you found this discussion valuable, please like, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more deep dives into the forces reshaping our world. Until next time, take care.